What's going on? My name is Dave Comedy. I'm an artist and designer, and recently I created my very first texture pack called Stain. It's a collection of 60 different urban concrete textures that you can add into your work to give it a little bit more grit, a little bit more grime, a little bit more dirtiness, or just, kind of add a little bit of a distressing to the work that you're already doing. And you guys have asked me to show how I use it in my own stuff so that maybe you can turn around and go and apply this same textures, these same techniques to your work. Let's get into it. Now, the most basic and simple way to use these textures is to start with backgrounds, and you can see right from my header image here that they have got quite a few. In fact, this is actually a couple of different images compiled together to create this texture back here. And though these are very deliberate concrete images, you can still see that if you incorporate them the right way, they can still have a very organic nature to them and can be applied in different ways that some might be a little bit uncharacteristic. Now, if you look at this poster image that I made for a daily poster project, obviously I have one of the images from Stained in the background to create this kind of essence of this poster is sitting on something else. If I zoom in here, you can tell that I've got one image for my background here on the side, but even the poster itself has a background image that's faded into the background as well. If I zoom in here to this red section, you can see I've got textures here. I've got some texture in here in this purple area, and then I've got some textures that have been a little bit distorted, but over here in this orange. All of these were taken from the Stained pack. So one of the ways that I like to use these textures is to bring them in and lay them on top of another image in an overlay or other blending mode. I'm going to bring in number 9. It's going to come in landscaped, and as you can see, the images are all very high resolution. My image here is probably normal internet resolution, but this image is obviously very large. I believe it's off the top of my head, 3,000 by 4,000 pixels. I'm going to resize it down, but I'm also going to make sure that I'm applying this in the area that I want it to. Because it's so large, I have the flexibility of being able to move it around. Obviously, I can't see what I'm doing right now, but if I zoom out and then I just put this on as an overlay, I'll lower the opacity down to about 50%, and you can see that it adds a bit of a grime. I can also change the overlay to something different, maybe a hard light, a hard mix. That gives it an even more retro feel. I can darken it up or use color. I use these blending modes all the time. In fact, that color burn actually looks pretty good for this particular image. Ultimately, when it comes to blending modes, I say experiment as much as you possibly can because you never know what kind of cool effects you're gonna get. Now, a third technique that I use is displacement filters. So now in our main layer, I'm gonna go up to the layer menu and I'm gonna use a live filter. I'm gonna go to distort and then displace. And it's gonna bring up this dialog box here. Now I could do this a couple of different ways. I can go and load my map from the file. I'm not gonna choose 9 this time. I'm gonna use a different one that's a little bit more extreme. Let's say 13 right there. That's one of my favorites. And as you can see, it's already applied to 10 pixels and the distressing has already happened. If I bring that down to like 0, that's normal. And I can go either way. I can go negative or positive. And the way this works is it's essentially turning my image into a straight up black or grayscale image. And it's using that data to reverse or inverse the information, whatever I decide to use. So if I go this way, it's gonna kind of turn out a little bit different than if I go this way. It looks kind of the same, but it really is kind of reversing the imagery. Now it doesn't take much, especially on very large images, and I can actually scale this up to kind of really bring out some texture. The more that I do this, obviously, the more distressing that I'm going to put in there. And another way I could do this is I could load from layers beneath. And this one is interesting because it's just going to pull the information from this particular image. Now, if I had like a whole montage or collage of image is pulled in, it's going to pull all the data from whatever is beneath this particular layer. You can see that I'm starting to accentuate the detail of that car just by doing that. Now, one of the ways I use it most often is on type. And so if I go in and we're going to load a map, and I think I'm going to use number 6 for this one. Now, it's going to apply to everything, but if there are ways to apply it to just the text. If I just bring this in, I'm going to zoom in just because I don't want a lot of texture. I just want a little bit. And you can see that it adds quite a bit of texture just doing that. If I go in and drop a new fill layer and now edit this, and if I change the scale to fit, it gets even crazier. Let's say I duplicate that type layer, bring it above, change the color of that to, let's say, an off-white. Now that texture layer back there behind it, a little bit extreme, but if I reduce it down just a tad, if I move this just slightly to one direction or the other, now it becomes a texturized drop shadow. Another way I like to use them is masks. So if I take that same image, I've rearranged it a little bit. I'm gonna apply 2 filters to it. First, I'm gonna apply a hue and saturation so that I can take the saturation all the way down to 0, so that it's grayscale or monochromatic. And then on top of that, I'm going to do a curves and really get extreme with my textures, because what I want is a very clear black and white image. And the one thing to keep in mind in this particular process is that the black is going to be what our mask is. So the more or less black that I have, that's what's going to end up getting masked out. Now again, I'm getting a little bit extreme with this one because I want you to see what's on the screen. I wouldn't necessarily do it quite this intense. So now I'm going to take those, I'm going to group them, and now I'm going to duplicate that. That way I always have a backup in case I mess this up. Take the group I'm not using and put it down here below so you can't see it. I'm gonna right click on this group and then I'm gonna go rasterize to mask, and there you go. And if I wanted to make sure it was only applied to a particular layer, I would take that and I would drag it right on top of that layer. So now if I go in and place another fill layer, also with red, that red will show through. As opposed to when I had it back up here, it masks out everything. And finally, there are 10 seamless images that you can also use all those same techniques on, with the added benefit that these will repeat if you need them. Now again, they're pretty large images. As you can see, they are 3000 by 3000 pixels square, but if you need them to be larger than that, you can. I'm gonna go ahead and make this to 6000 by 6000. Now if I take one and I just click an option and drag until it's supposed to snap, there you go. You can see completely, totally seamless. Now if I take those two and also drag them, a 100% 6000 pixel square image that can be seamlessly achieved simply. And there you go. Those are all the techniques that I personally use on my work, but there is numerous ways that you can use these textures. All you got to do is get in there and play around. The more that you play, the more interesting things you'll find. If you enjoyed that, hit the like button, and of course if you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and hit the subscribe and hit that bell, because you never want to miss a thing. Okay, I'm gonna get out. Remember, be good today, be even better tomorrow. See ya.